Hello and welcome everyone to today's digital live event, CREtech Talks, Emerging Trends in Construction Technology. My name is Ashkan Zandia, Chief Intelligence Officer here at CREtech, and I'm excited to be your host today. In a few minutes, we will hear from the most insightful and active owners, operators, developers, and technology investors as they discuss their perspective on the construction tech sector and how today's developers are leveraging technology to increase productivity and, more importantly, profitability. While we're waiting for everyone to log into the digital seats, I wanted to quickly share with you a list of upcoming events here at CREtech. On Tuesday, June 16th and Tuesday, June 30th, we'll be hosting, in partnership with REBNY, the Real Estate Board of New York State of Mind, conversations on real estate, innovation, and the future of the city. Next month, on July 27th through July 30th, we'll be hosting the world's largest real estate tech digital conference, CREtech, Reimagining Real Estate Global Virtual Summit. Registration is open for our digital summit, so please join us at CREtech.com to reserve your digital seat. And on Tuesday, September 15th, we'll be hosting our now world famous virtual demo day, where you will hear from the most innovative and leading technology companies in the built world. If you would like to use the power of CREtech to be featured in an exclusive co-produced webinar on a topic of your choice to showcase your company's expertise, please email me at ash, that's A-S-H, at CREtech.com, or by going on to CREtech.com and hitting the Contact Us button. Throughout today's conversation, if you, our amazing audience and community, have any questions, please submit them using the Q&A button located at the bottom of your page. We'd love to hear from you, so please submit your questions early and often, and we'll do our best to answer them for you. With that said, I see that we have a large crowd gathering, so let's just get the show on the road already. It's my pleasure to introduce our leading esteemed panel today. Today's panel will be moderated by Daniel Fettner, Principal at Corage Ventures, Chitki Chin, Executive Vice President, Chief Data and Innovation Officer at Suffolk, Mark Akamundo, Partner at Heartland Ventures, Sungju Cho, General Partner at D20 Capital, and Greg Goucher, Executive Vice President at Related Companies. Daniel, the digital stage is now yours.
Thank you, Ash. So we have an awesome group today with representation from really all across the construction value chain. So I want to kick off the conversation by really diving into the investor landscape within the construction tech ecosystem. And I think specifically this group is unique because really each firm has a different investing model, ranging from your classic CVC to almost like an innovation as a service platform. And so I want to give an opportunity for each panelist to showcase their respective investing platform. And Sung, why don't we start with you? You guys are a relatively new fund, very large corporate backer. I personally really enjoyed reading the blog post you guys published earlier this year, laying out your goals, strategy, discussing where you guys fall within the spectrum of strategic versus financial. So tell us more about D20 and how you work with Doosan.
Awesome. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Ash. Yeah, so D20 Capital was started last year in partnership with Doosan, which is a Korean conglomerate with operating businesses in areas ranging from construction machines to heavy industries. And we spent a lot of time last year structuring D20 Capital in a way that makes us completely independent, independent decision-making done here in California and no strategic mandate. And that allows us to invest in the construction tech space, but also in other sectors as we explore opportunities. So our sole mandate at D20 Capital is to generate financial returns. And I think it's a great model. And I have to give credit to my partners who laid the groundwork for months or maybe even years before I joined. But I just got to join for the fun part. So some other similar models out there. There's like Sapphire Ventures that works closely with SAP, and there's like Decibel that was just recently set up with Cisco. And so yeah, we're set up. We were initially focusing on the construction tech space because that's what we know. Like some of our parent companies operating businesses include Bobcat and Doosan Infracore. So good institutional knowledge around the space, but pretty flexible overall.
Cool. JK, why don't you go next? I know Suffolk's venture arm is also relatively new. You guys have a number of investments under your belt, including one that we've co-invested with together. So where do you guys kind of lie on this spectrum? How does your approach similar or different to D20?
Yeah, no, great question. So I'd say when we started down this journey about 1.5 years ago is how old the investment program is. We started by asking the question, we want to be good strategic and financial investors, right? So we sort of evaluate both angles, and we want each one of them to sort of stand up on its own. And so then the question rapidly becomes, is there enough intersection? So if you're a strategic investor as well as a financial investor, you basically got to believe that there are enough deals out there that both make sense to do financially and can deliver a venture style return, but also strategically is within our kind of call it scope of expertise, if you like, and can benefit us, right? At some point down the road, may not be immediate, but there needs to be line of sight to strategic benefit. I think our conclusion, so we started with that question before we decided how large of an effort we should go after this. And we came to the conclusion that just by virtue of where we are at a point in time for contact, and more broadly, I would call it built environment technology, there actually were sufficient deal flow, attractive deal flow that we believe deliver a good financial return and do have strategic benefit. So, I'm not trying to weasel out of the answer here, but we're sort of midway on that spectrum, right? We look at both angles when we make an investments. We evaluate both contributions separately and then come to a conclusion. What we did do is to broaden the aperture a little bit. So Suffolk has now broadened beyond just a core construction management. That is still our core, obviously, but we have an invest arm. So alongside our technology investments, we also have a real estate investment entity that actually co-invests alongside developer partners into the real estate side, so upstream. And then we also have a self-performed subsidiary, right? So we also do certain scopes of work. With all that, we sort of broaden our aperture to just include not just in contact, but prop tech, real estate tech, and everything along that built environment chain. And then with that, we think it's sufficient.
I'm just curious, one follow-up there. So on the financial return perspective, do you guys ever maybe underwrite deals differently than an institutional VC where valuation might matter a little less if you're getting your capital back in the form of cost savings, right, by being a customer, which I think would be an advantage. I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, good question. So we've positioned ourselves also because we are early. The way we ensure that we are thinking about venture investments also from a sound financial basis, because I think the past is littered with corporate ventures that was too into the strategic side, and then you take investments that don't actually pay off on a financial basis. We have, as a senior venture advisor, someone that comes from the institutional investment side, and so brings that financial investment discipline to ensure that when we evaluate each opportunity, we are very, we bring the best of sort of institutional investing to it. But then in terms of just our level of maturity of where we are right now, we're not leading rounds. So we have an explicit follow strategy. It also avoids some of the conflicts with institutional investors and with conflicts between the strategic mandate that we have and the mandate that all the startups have, of course, which is to scale and grow and to deliver that venture style return. So far, that separation, I suppose, has helped us. So if you think about it, because we have institutional style advisory input upfront when we invest, we don't take positions that are untenable from the start. And then because we take follow investments, we really work with them on a strategic side. And then if at some point, the company needs to go in a different direction or maybe not fully aligned to us, that's kind of fine. And we rely on the expertise of the institutional lead investor to take them on that journey. One final thing I'll say is that we make sure that we also build a relationship, therefore, with the institutional lead, like yourself, Daniel. It's kind of co-investment on the one company we've co-invested in. And so it's an active dialogue. And that strategy so far has worked well. It's avoided certain conflicts. It's kind of helped us because our main purpose is not just to invest for the sake of investment. We want to actually capture the value. So much of the challenge in this industry around technology is adoption. And that's where we can make a difference. And so this strategy, I think, checks the boxes for us.
Cool. And we'll certainly get into adoption later. Mark, let's talk about the Heartland model. So speaking of institutional VCs, right? You're an independent institutional VC, but you also get the benefit of working with a number of different construction firms in your LP base. Tell us how you work with your LPs and really how ultimately those relationships benefit the startups that you guys invest in.
Sure, happy to do so. So I'll give you I'll start with about a minute background here on who Heartland is and how we operate. And then I think I can give you a little bit more context to the specific strategic question you asked there. So Heartland started about 3.5 years ago, actually out of South Bend, Indiana. So small town, northern Indiana, where my partner Max and I got to know quite a few of the local business owners that, billion-dollar companies in the middle of northern Indiana that nobody's really ever heard of. After a couple of conversations with them, we realized, these are our family, multi-generational, community-oriented businesses that have been around for centuries in some circumstances, that are very passionate about the area that they live and what they're planning to build for not necessarily, their family, but generations to come and to come. So the more we dug in with them, the more we began to understand that the next generation that's taking leadership is really technology native, understands the impact that technology can have, but also has that, intrinsic understanding and value behind the core business, the core operations that they've built, yet don't have access or don't have insights into the two new types of technology that are being developed elsewhere, predominantly out on the coast, in the Bay Area, here in New York City, up in Boston, wherever it might be. So the model that we created was simply to play matchmaker, to connect founders building great technology solutions that are solving problems that these Midwestern customers are suffering from every single day, and connecting them. So the way we look at our investments is we are very much an independent, financially oriented venture capital firm. The value that we can bring to the table in terms of this, this dynamic LP base. So all of these Midwestern businesses are investors in our fund, and Fund 1 was just Northern Indiana. We're now operating out of Fund 2, which includes Indianapolis, Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati. So we have a broader spectrum across the middle of America. How we use that is really for a couple of reasons. One, to uncover what are real problems and what are real insights that these businesses want technology to solve, and two, compete to win, to get access to deals. So we try to remain as flexible as we can in terms of, cash into the company, ownership percentages. What we want to do is align ourselves with the best companies, with the greatest group of co-investors that we can be value add to. And value add for us, quite candidly, means, can we bring customers to the table? Can we bring a diversification of new revenue? Can we bring new and excited parties that are willing to suffer through some problems of a seed or Series A company that aren't fully fleshed out, iterate on product, and be well aligned enough in this little internal flywheel to want to give honest and candid feedback and make the product better and great. And then once it's fully rolled out and everybody's loving and using it, transform these investors and early customers into champions on behalf of the product, on behalf of the company, to tell all their buddies at their golf clubs or wherever they're hanging out at, that there's this great new technology that they're invested, that's transformed their business, and they're super excited to tell everybody else about it.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense. It's a win-win-win. It's a great model. So Greg, last but certainly not least, we've worked closely with you guys for some time now. And one of the things I love about Related's approach is really how many different people within the organization are involved in the prop tech strategy. It's very clear you guys have made a commitment to stay on the forefront of innovation. Tell us more about how you and Related think about your strategy with construction and development tech.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. So we're a large real estate company, largely in development, but we have many different aspects of our business. And we do have a culture of sort of entrepreneurship and innovation. Even though we are big, we're very entrepreneurial. And it is just incumbent upon us to, know the latest trends in prop tech and be a leader in that field, and construction technology particularly. And as we all know, the advancement and adoption of construction technology is way behind other industries, and there's so much room for improvements. And I think we're intent on being at the front of that, and we have the platform to do it. Our group, it's called the Related Prop Tech Group, was about 6 or 7 of us who a few years ago just sort of found each other wandering the halls and self-interest, and sort of just secretly formed our own little group. And that over 2 years though, we called the fire hose of companies that came in, and we started organizing and shared, tracking logs and email distribution lists and there's more and more interest from the company, or more and more people over the last 2 years said, "God, what are you doing there?" And we started being a much more bigger platform for the greater company in all regions and all asset classes. And we broke it out into multiple. Now we have 6 different task force, one task force being construction technology. And so we go from different markets, from Chicago and LA and Boston, and we can really analyze the things. And we do believe strongly in pilot programs. We are not a prop tech fund. We're not we're not looking at making massive investments. I mean, we haven't anyway to date, but more modest investments. What we look to do is to really find technology and businesses that can help us in our businesses, right? We have a wide line of businesses. If we can find, we're not interested in just a great idea that's nothing to do with our business. That's just not us, right? Right. If something can help our business, and then in turn, we can actually help that company develop their product more and help them with adoption, because we have such a large platform. And we are at all major markets. We're all the major asset classes. We are vertically integrated for owner, developer, construction manager, in many cases subcontractors, property management. We can actually have a sort of unique capacity to force adoption, or not force, but to nurture adoption. And so that's how the value, that's when we would invest small amounts in companies to get them going.
Great. And we just had a question come in for you, Greg. What other task forces within prop tech or task force do you guys have besides construction tech? Is there one for like multifamily and residential?
Yeah, exactly. So residential is one, which goes a lot of tenant engagement, customer engagement, and operating properties or new innovations in the built environment in the residential space. We have a commercial office sort of space technology group. We have a information technology group of general information management. And we also have a renewable energy group that's focused on systems. And I think there's 1 or 2 others. I can't remember, but those are the.
Awesome. Awesome. So, I mean, one of my takeaways here is just how new all of these strategies and investment vehicles are. And I think everyone's really just greasing the wheels and just now beginning to execute on their strategies, which I think goes to show that the holistic construction tech landscape is still in the very, very early innings. And, my view here is, I think we'll see something very similar play out to what's happened with prop tech, right? Prop tech used to be a subsector of fintech. Clearly today it's its own category, $30 or $40 billion invested last year. Construction tech today, though, is just, a subsector within prop tech. And I think, a few years from now, it will be its own behemoth of a category. So let's move on to the next discussion topic. I know there are a whole bunch of entrepreneurs and startups on the call. Let's all put our investment hats on and really provide some advice for the companies seeking investment. And so, forgetting sectors and themes for a minute, because we'll get to that next. Let's talk about what you guys most look for when evaluating a company, whether it's team, product, business model. What are the must-haves? What are the nice-to-haves? And maybe Mark and Sung, you guys are the full-time investors. Let's start with you guys.
Sure, I can start. So I think it really depends on stage. So if you're investing at the seed stage, obviously, you can't really expect too much in terms of customer traction. So I think the team, some people like to call it founder market fit, right? So why is this team uniquely positioned to make an impact or disrupt, what they're going for? And then from Series A and afterwards, I think if you're really looking purely for from a financial return perspective, it's, there's a lot of metrics involved. I think the one interesting thing about construction tech is it's a really, as you mentioned, right? I think it's kind of a transition phase right now. It's a really exciting time because all construction companies are starting to really embrace technology more and more. I love how, for example, with Suffolk, Jikki has set up this innovation office. And I think, the large GCs that I've talked to, these kinds of like central innovation offices have been set up in the last, 3 to 4 years. And so what we really like to see in Series A companies is, have they been able to penetrate kind of these, core HQ basically, right? And secure enterprise contracts versus going kind of project to project, which, it'll always be a balance of both in terms of customer interaction. But I think because Series A and beyond, like those kinds of customer relationships are really important to us.
Makes a lot of sense. Mark, anything to add there around, what you guys are specifically looking for when you guys are underwriting a deal?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're typically pretty early stage in that seed Series A category as well. So that's where I spend a lot of my time and the majority of my focus. So in an effort not to echo, Sung's points, I agree. I think that's a big piece of it at the early stage. One additional element I'd like to share, and feedback we often get from our LPs, general contractors, excavators, civil engineering companies. We're going to talk about this later, I'm sure, but adoption is incredibly challenging in this industry. So finding something and designing something that has a strong focus on usability, understanding who that power user is on the other side, and almost building a consumer-like experience, a consumer application-like experience for a B2B or enterprise level software will, work wonders for a lot of these companies. No matter how valuable it is throughout the value chain, if you can't get the users to engage with it and to enjoy working with it, and for it to improve their lives on a day-to-day basis, the money will follow after that point is one of the major things we look for. And that's a great way to get feedback from our LPs in our process is, will people use this? Will I pay money for it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, customer validation, especially within construction tech, and especially now that we have, the Suffolks and the D20s of the world. If I'm looking at an investment and Jikki tells me that Suffolk's going to be a customer, or Greg tells me that Related's going to be a customer, that's a huge validation for us. Jikki and Greg, for you guys, I think what would be most helpful to hear about is how Suffolk and Related think about pilots, about how to form a commercial relationship with you guys. What advice can you give for entrepreneurs looking to sell into your respective companies? And I guess one more topic, related to adoption is, there are some companies who are willing to kind of be the guinea pig, and others who prefer to see some of their counterparts, validate it before just jumping in, given how hard it is to train folks.
Jikki, you want to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Greg. So happy to talk about that, Daniel. I think maybe before I go into the pilots and forming commercial relationship, I just want to build on some of what the others have said around what we look for. The one advice I'd give everyone is that if you're selling to a contractor, anything that saves time and is going to be much easier to sell. So it's that usability point that Mark was talking about. But beyond that is that some startups think that, oh, this would be really cool to do, and it might yield longer term benefit or, avoid cost or whatever. But that's not the easiest angle to sell in. The easiest angle to sell in, certainly in the environment we were in prior to COVID, and probably still the case, is like, does this save me time or not? So I've seen a lot of very successful, simple workflow digitization tools that's gained a lot of traction. Now, the tension is sometimes some of those things may not be investable or may not have the potential to scale, right? So the best is when you can get both. But that's just kind of one build on what the others have talked about before. I think in terms of how we see piloting and getting to a commercial relationship, we look at we're always open to pilot. We don't need others to pilot it first before we do. So it's one of that entrepreneurial spirit that Greg also talked about that we pride ourselves on. And we have developed the coupling mechanism, if you like, that takes tech that is maybe just a bit too far out of being ready, of being kind of driver ready, and operations. And that is our kind of collab structure. So out in the press, over the last 2 years, we've built out this dedicated kind of technology-enabled kind of collaboration space where a lot of the newer technologies can be showcased to all sorts of stakeholders, our teams, our clients, you know, our partners, as well as staff them with dedicated people that can then help the teams, help talk through the value proposition, help our operations team understand why they should adopt, right? And so that mechanism is our coupling mechanism where, of course, they sort of understand what operations is looking for, but they also, and through collaboration with the investment side, understand kind of what's coming down the pike. And that's kind of worked well for us.
It kind of sounds like a sandbox.
It is a little bit like a sandbox. It's like an organized way to be quite deliberate about the innovation process. So we think about the innovation process from like, you know, really far out stuff, research and development, maybe seed stage companies, what, you know, and various other things. Then you get to like a point where you have a prototype that you need to pilot on site somewhere and get feedback so you can improve product market fit. Your product gets ready and maybe you take it from one site to like, you know, 1 to 2 sites or going on to 5. And at some point it's a stage gate where you say, okay, now I release it for broad consumption for a certain category of sites, or frankly, if it is an ERP type application, then that becomes the standard, right?
Yep.
And so that's a fairly deliberate process, and that's how we think about it. So we play on all that. We have stage gates that actually release different pieces at different points in time. And so then the commercial relationship develops from just, you know, a pilot through to like, okay, you will be our preferred vendor in some sense for this type of application, which may not be applicable to all jobs, but, you know, we'll certainly recommend you. We'll do some of the work in the go-to-market, like reaching out to our teams, letting people know about it, through to like co-developing training materials or manuals or, you know, user-facing collateral to help people adopt.
Cool. And like as a follow-up, and this is for both you and Greg, is being a user or a customer of the startup a requirement to consider an investment, just so the entrepreneurs out there understand?
No, not. We prefer to have a relationship beforehand. So when it's a relationship through conversation, you know, just the same way an institutional VC would have relationships with the network of entrepreneurs out in the ecosystem, we develop relationships with, you know, companies that we're watching. At the right time, we introduce for pilots because we recognize that for investment, sometimes a product is still too early to foist off on one of our operational teams, which has fairly high demands on robustness, scalability, you know, functionality and whatnot.
Cool.
Yeah, for us, yes, we have lots of relationships which we've been fostering, and some are not ready for as a customer or investment, but we keep like those relationships. We have lots of those actually, and they're very helpful. But we would not actually invest if we were not a customer.
Got it. And Greg, for you guys, any best practices on how to sell into related?
I do.
You know, is there a way a startup should kind of?
Yeah, ready? Here's my list. Okay.
All right.
One, and I met so many of them, and it's great. I really like the meetings. And here's some points. Some of these are maybe my personal do's and don'ts, but one, be patient, but persistent without being pushy, right? Some of these takes a while to sort of unveil so just, you know, be patient, but persistent. Be open book, right? Don't try to hide things or hide numbers. The more open book, the more we're going to engage. Know your competitors, right? And be prepared to address why your tool is better. It's shocking to me how many people I say, who are the competitors? I'm not really sure, or I'm not really sure why ours is different. Do not spend any time on the pitch about talking about the size of the market. I don't care. It's $1 trillion construction market, whatever. Do not waste time. Do not spend time talking about every detail, every founder and team person. All right. Do spend time if there's some relevant, you know, experience on some key people that are relevant to this product. Don't spend any time telling us how reducing schedule or catching mistakes early will save money and therefore worthy of investment, right? That's just sort of, maybe some investors need that. We don't need to know that. That's a lot. It's amazing how we can get 15 minutes with all this stuff, which is worthless to us, right? So do get right to the point and show how your technology works and what it does, right? Like within 5 minutes. And then have a simple demo to show if we can, right? And then certainly a pilot, we are very pilot driven. So be ready to propose a pilot structure right away. And either do free, or I get it sometimes when there's costs involved and people want a little bit of skin in the game, but it's a tiny fee occasionally is okay, depending on the asset. And to also don't, I personally don't like when people try to prove out a detailed ROI on these tools. I find that annoying, but I want to know how it works, and then I'll do my own calculation.
Cool. A lot of P's in there. So persistent, patient, not pushy, pilots. Very, very good. So all interesting perspectives. Hopefully the entrepreneurs out there took away some good insights and best practices. I would add for us at Corgen, one thing that is extremely important to us, and Sung mentioned it, is founder market fit. I think especially within construction, which is such an old school and antiquated industry, I like to talk about this concept of gentle disruption that I've seen be effective, where you don't want to shock the system, and to gently disrupt an industry, category expertise is critical. Having that network in the market that you're going after. And so for us personally, we prefer teams that where there's at least one founder who's come from the industry, ideally is solving a problem that they experienced firsthand. So let's keep going. Now that we've talked about what you guys all look for in teams and products and the do's and don'ts, let's talk about some of the themes and technologies that you guys are all most interested in. And I think it'd be useful in taking the lens of really both investors, what's hot right now, as well as operators. What are some of the biggest pains you guys are experiencing as a developer or a contractor? Anyone feel free to jump in and kick us off.
I can go. Yeah, so kind of what you just said, talked about, Daniel, with founder market fit. I think the interesting thing, and I alluded to this before with construction tech, is this slowly but surely this massive transition. And I think these what I like to call site digitization 1.0 with Procore, PlanGrid, FieldWire kind of paving the way and making everything digital. And that paves the way for site digitalization 2.0, where there's so many cool tools and solutions and technologies out there to help accelerate the collection and collection of high quality data, right? So it's kind of getting iPads out there and then getting the technologies to make things much more efficient and analytical. But like you said, we don't want to shock the system. So I think the importance of founders that have experience on construction sites, and to be completely honest, I don't, right? I'm pretty new to the construction space. So unlike Greg, I need some of these founders teaching me. But I think there's the interesting thing that I'm seeing coming from institutional VC firms is that there's a lot of tried and true models that are being applied to the construction tech space. And so, I'm just excited about a lot of these tools that are really accelerating the collection and usage of data to just go from, more efficient, data management to more kind of active insights. But I don't think right now, these, fancy AI tools just saying put data into a black box and on the outside, here's your answer. I don't think that's the answer right now. It's more kind of, I don't want to call it baby steps, but a more natural progression.
Yeah, and a follow-up to that, and I know you also have some views on automation, Sung. I'm curious in your perspective, especially having the institutional VC breadth, where you've seen other industries, go through a similar technology adoption, curve and an inflection point. Is this industry really ready for robotics, for instance? I know I've seen personally a bunch of robotics companies. I've seen a bunch of sensor companies. There are a lot of startups focused on automation. Just as a follow-up, I'm curious if you think the industry is ready for it.
I think I think it is, and I'd love to hear Greg and Jiki and Mark's opinions as well. I think it is at the very early stages, because if you think about it, Kiva sold to Amazon, I don't know how many years ago, right? And then those founders left, and they basically created the same thing and sold to Shopify. So I think it's robotics in an industry is a really long journey. And so, you know, I really like the robotics entrepreneurs right now that are taking their, you know, very advanced robotics technologies, but operating as a subcontractor, right? So that they're actually operating the robots themselves, and they're not really expecting to kind of throw a robot over the fence and say, you know, take care of it, right? So I think, you know, I've spoken to a few GCs who are just like, this is the coolest thing ever. You know, working for our company now has become, you know, this is almost like a recruiting tool, like, hey, join us and you can work with these robots. So I think it's the early days, but the potential is there for sure.
My view on automation is an interesting one. I think we're definitely early. I might say we're a bit too early. Now, we're not a design build outfit. I think it depends also on what kind of contracting structure you sit within. So as a CM, the benefits for us to deploy, like, we're not probably the customers, right? You kind of sell it to the person doing the work first. So I think in certain markets, it makes a ton of sense. In certain markets, it may not. And the reason for that is that it feels like a lot of the automation out there requires very precise operating conditions. And if any one of those operating conditions are off or not present, then it doesn't work. And so I don't think that at this point in time in our kind of construction portfolio, that those set of defined operating conditions are always prevalent to make it worth it. You know what I mean? So I've seen like sort of rebar tying machines. I've seen like the spot dog that sort of runs around with maybe the camera on the head, and you can take that one. Might be cool. Like, I think, you know, navigation of spaces might be fine now. But then the investment required on robotics, right? Then you ask whether or not the value is there for the effort you got to put in. That's just my personal view, but I will kind of caveat by saying that I haven't looked into robotics and automation deeply for site operations.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up just how long a play this is, right? And so, you know, we've looked at a bunch of really awesome robotics companies and concepts, and kind of where we got stuck a couple of times was that this is such a long play. We're investing out of a 10-year fund vehicle, right? And so, you know, if they're not even going to have a product in market for 5 or 6 years, you know, it might be a better area for, you know, permanent capital to be looking at it.
Greg, what's your view? I was curious, actually, from the latest view.
No, I think I love robotics, and I think it's a little early, as you say, and we've seen a few, and some actually are operating as subcontractors, like Simon was saying. And it's a little early. I do think that the drones, you know, computer vision, and or LiDAR, you know, just like the autonomous vehicles are advancing that technology. That technology is ripe. It is almost there, and then combine that with AI, and you can really, and then you combine that with actual BIM models that are working, which is another thing we need to work on in our industry. It's getting everything up on BIM. So I think that's ripe. That is about to happen, and that will be a game changer, I think. And in terms of the actual robots building stuff, that's a little further down the road, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Image is mature. Image and LiDAR are both mature. Yeah.
Cool. Mark, any thoughts on this topic or any other themes?
I do. This is actually probably, I would say, the main topic of discussion internally over the past couple of months is, so we invested in a company more in the manufacturing space that's autonomy for forklifts. So we spent quite a bit of time really trying to understand the space and the applications and the analogies between manufacturing and warehousing logistics to eventually into construction. And I guess the thesis that we've come up with, obviously Greg and Jiki, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is it ultimately really depends on the use case and the pain point that you're trying to solve. So where we've identified probably one of the biggest pain points being, you know, labor, particularly welding. It's a, you know, hard trade skill, very few and far between, you know, experts in that field, and very expensive to hire and maintain, and requires a you know, absolute precise level of detail in the work. So if there was the right application specifically around welding that was ready to go, everything would make sense. But it ultimately comes down to, what are you replacing? Are you hiring, you know, a robotic arm that can be trained and skilled like a welder can be, but can operate, you know, with exact precision 18, 24 hours a day, you know, at night, during rain, whatever it might be. That ultimately today where people will adopt is, if the pain's right and the price is right, there's people that are ready to dive
in. Two more P's, pain and price. So, you know, clearly there's no shortage of, you know, interesting themes. So for us, you know, two spaces that we've spent considerable time looking at is the labor shortage. We spent a lot of time there. And then more recently, kind of the intersection around fintech and construction. And on the labor side, last fall, we invested in a company along with Suffolk called TradeHounds, which actually just announced this morning via Crunchbase. So I wanted to give them a shout out. They'll be rolling out a jobs platform this summer where they're effectively going to be the LinkedIn for construction. That's their goal. On the fintech side, we've been looking at a bunch of solutions within construction lending, payments, insurance. And our kind of view there has been, you know, due to the unique demographic, entrepreneurs really need to be purpose building product for the specific construction industry use case, rather than, you know, trying to cross-sell existing products into the industry. So I know we want to open it up to questions in 4 or 5 minutes. So why don't we transition to the last topic here? Let's bring it up 30,000 feet and discuss the macro landscape for a bit. Adoption. You know, 2020 is a strange year. You know, I'd love to hear everyone's opinion about whether you all believe that COVID will have a net positive or a net negative impact on the industry's technology adoption curve. Anyone can jump in.
All right, I'll go first. So I think 2020 indeed is a strange year, and so it may just be too strange for us to a lot to happen in the next. But I think it's actually, we opened our construction sites last Monday, this past Monday, and things seem to be getting back to usual. And I think both the level of technology, which is advancing fast, I think is at the right point, and the minds are actually more open. I think with this sort of change in environment, there's a lot of changes going on, right? And I think this is a moment of change in the world. And so I think that actually will help with adoption. So I think there's gonna be a positive change this year, and probably a much more of a change even next year.
I guess my 2 cents on that topic is a lot of our partners in the Midwest were deemed essential throughout this process. You know, whether they're doing infrastructure, utility projects, or even, you know, larger developments, you know, Section 8 housing, things like that, were all deemed essential. What you realize is that, you know, at any point, you know, things can kind of be taken away from you, and the luxuries you have in place are scalable. So where if you have a few projects that are put on hold, a lot of the commercial developments, a lot of the office space, a lot of the residential and multifamilies were kind of put on hold. That a lot of our partners created an opportunity or brought health and safety to the top. It now has a seat at the table to really start talking about these types of topics, that if there is applications that are not just COVID specific and going to live for the next, you know, until this is behind us, but will have longevity beyond that, you now have another executive at the table that's thinking about these types of things. So if there's a time to step back about the work because they haven't been, all the way, pedal to the metal busy, innovation gets a seat at the table, particularly around health and safety of their teams and their employees. So that's what we've seen and kind of taken a deeper look into.
I think in addition to health and safety, kind of the uncertainty, right? And we're talking about this before the panel started, but by no means is everything kind of in steady state right now. And so in the face of uncertainty, I think there's a lot of technologies that can help prepare for, in the face of uncertainty. So, we work closely with a company called Construction Site, and gathering images, because we just don't know what the turnover in the workforce will look like when sites will reopen and all that. So technologies like that, or as Daniel mentioned with with trade hounds or other kind of workforce management tools, if there's a way to scale up the workforce really quickly when you need to, using technology, I think those kinds of tools that were gaining momentum before the crisis, but I think the crisis will serve as a huge kind of force of acceleration.
Yeah. Maybe just, sorry, go on, Daniel.
No, I was actually going to pose a question to you and Greg. I'm curious, drilling down a bit from both of your guys' perspectives. Like, what are you hearing from your teams in terms of, and this is kind of going the adoption route, what are you hearing from your teams in terms of their willingness or partners that you're working with, the willingness to experiment with new technologies? I know, a year ago when we had this conversation, you guys were saying we're getting a lot of pushback, whether it's our own team or partners that we're working with. Have you guys seen a change in just like the openness and desire to experiment with new technologies, compared to, let's say, a year ago?
Yeah, let me, a lot of different things that were said. So just to address the question directly, Daniel, couple of things is true, right? People had more time. Obviously, sites are now open, but for a while they were sitting there for a few months, depending on which market you were in. So they had more time and some more willingness to learn new workflows and learn new technologies that they didn't have time before. So that's a plus. Two, there is certainly a focus on certain things like health and safety, a big focus on remote monitoring. So we're investors in also in an image kind of gathering solution called Open Space. And we've seen huge uptick in their take up as owners don't, basically any non-essential personnel don't want to go on the site anymore. So having a 360 camera that captures images and you can do a virtual site walkthrough is very useful. So we see take up of some, but then the countervailing forces, I suppose, is things like budgets are going to be squeezed, just for sure, right? And so any technology that has incremental spend that is not strictly necessary is going to get, kind of looked at, right? Secondly, is also that labor is not as scarce as it was. So I think a lot of the forces before is we were in such a hot market going in that like people will buy any tool if it saves them time. That's why that was the simplest selling point. Going forwards, that may not be true, right? Just from a jobs perspective. Mm-hmm. And so if, I can work a bit harder, but and save that cost, I'm going to do it. So some of those tools might go. So in the end, what we see from our sites is that there's a lot of demand for remote monitoring solutions, things that don't require physical touch or presence. So digitization in general will accelerate. I do believe this. I think there continues to be, and this was a trend before COVID, demand for risk mitigation solutions. Construction was always a risky job, right? You got to mitigate time, cost, quality, safety risk, and the demand for those types of risk mitigation solutions, if they work, is going to stay. If nothing else, I think insurance will be stepping up to the plate because they're the ones that have to deal with the claims down the road. And also from the owner side, you don't necessarily want that exposure, right?
Yeah.
So those are the trends will continue, and there will continue to be pull. The last thing I'd say is digitization is probably not done. When I started doing this, I thought digitization was well on its way. Procore existed, PlanGrid, Fuel, all those things existed. But now it's moving to parts of the supply chain that maybe didn't, that hadn't had that focus before. So I'm hearing of a lot of second generation ERPs for specific subs, for specific scopes of work, where the default was still the kind of old Gen 1, sort of one size fits all type of ERPs. And those will be successful because I think there'll be demand. Anyway, long ramble. Greg, what do you think?
I think I agree actually with everything you said. I think there are some counterfactors of the budget being tighter and labor more available. So you can just throw labor at it and not have it to be technology. And your other risk mitigation and digitization side, I agree. Something, we came back. I know personally, I was much more innovative in the last 3 months than, I had time to think about things, right? And so we came back strong this week, and we are actively talking to our teams about new technology. And it feels like they're more open than ever, for whatever reason. I'm not sure. whether just feel like it's innovative time, what's changing, you know, I'm not sure why. It feels like they are more receptive now than ever.
I'd agree with that.
That's great, and hopefully everyone continues to adopt and be open to these new technologies, and you know, hopefully we'll kind of get across this this hurdle and this inflection point, so that the construction tech space can continue to grow. I want to make sure we have at least 5 or 10 minutes for questions from those who joined. So Ash, do you want to take the mic back?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, amazing thought leadership there. Thank you, everyone. A lot of questions came through. Before we dive into it, Daniel, a question came for you specifically. You name dropped the company. Someone asked, who did Daniel say is going to be the LinkedIn of construction? So someone's asking, hey, can you share that
yeah, absolutely. So as of this morning, the news is now public. The company's called Tradehounds. And so we led their round last fall. Jitke and Suffolk invested alongside of us. So did Brick and Mortar Ventures, New England Development out of the greater Boston area. It's an awesome team. They're solving what I think is the biggest problem in the construction industry here in the US, which is the labor shortage. And they're also one of the very, very few companies in our portfolio that has kind of seen a macro tailwind as a result of, you know, the obviously unfortunate COVID situation, because they're going to be launching their jobs marketplace in a couple of months. And I'd imagine a good chunk of the construction labor force will be looking, you know, if they have been displaced during COVID.
Yeah, and hopefully they won't be too displaced for too much longer. So there's a lot of questions that came in regarding venture. So I'm going to do my best to consolidate a lot of the questions. One question that came in early and happened throughout the conversation was the conversation around or question regarding the average time to closing a deal. You know, the construction technology world to the construction world is very nuanced. So underwriting deals and actually closing deals are a little bit different than the conventional venture model. What is the average time? You know, obviously it's on a case-by-case scenario, but what is the average time before closing rounds generally?
Sure, I can take a first stab at that.
Yeah.
So we actually track this. We don't have it specifically for construction tech, but on average, from first meeting to term sheet for all the deals that we did last year, I think was like 31 or 32 days. I think ideally, and Jitke mentioned this earlier, you always want to have a relationship for as long as you possibly can before closing a deal. And so, you know, I think ideally, and I think Mark and Sung would probably agree that if you can build a relationship, be able to track the founder, track the company for a period of time before they raise, then you'll have a lot more confidence on their ability to execute. And I'm not sure construction tech is different than, you know, other industries with that respect, although, you know, these guys might have a different opinion.
Yeah, we invest typically in construction, manufacturing, logistics, warehousing. So it's a pretty similar cycle. I don't have the statistic like Daniel does, but I mean, we our last investment we spent about 14, 15 months with before we actually pulled the trigger. It was just way too early for us, but we loved the concept. We worked with them, and then eventually got to the point where we felt like this was the one and we're ready to go in head first. Other investments we've moved in as quick as, you know, 3 weeks. So it kind of all depends on time. We've led deals, we've you know, co-invested on deals, and the deals that are closing, we move a little bit quicker for. The deals that have a little bit of flexibility, we take all of our time we can.
So I'll pause there. A couple other questions came in regarding technology-related solutions. How is, and specifically around AR, how is the adoption of artificial intelligence progressing in the construction technology world? Virtual mock-ups, on-site construction templates, and others.
I suppose I should take that one.
Yeah,
Then,
I was hoping. I was waiting.
Would love Greg's view as well. AI is such an imprecise term. right? But everybody loves, it's like one of the most asked questions, but it's very imprecise. So I just sort of break it down to the different kinds of AI. We talked about image recognition being quite mature. There's a lot of image capture devices. There's a lot of use cases being built off of image capture devices. And so, you know, to the extent that you'd call that AI, which it is, right? I think that's reasonably mature. I think that some of the other applications of AI, so we're also investors in a company called SmartVid. We undertook research and development with them on predictive analytics. And that is one that is a very exciting area, but one with long burn, right? So the idea of being able to predict and use different types of data, whether it's image data, project data, and other indicators to predict risk to allow you to mitigate it before it happens is a powerful one and has been shown to work in other industries. So it should work here. But getting the data volumes, and making sure that it's sufficiently what I'd call process independent, because sometimes like it changes with your process and your process changes very often, and that kind of could be an issue in accuracy, right? That's just a longer burn, and it's and it will take a bit of time to wash out. But I think that's also very exciting. I think other types of AI, natural language processing also mature, I would say. A lot of people using like automated reading of text, extraction of clauses from contracts, reading of RFIs and submittals. I've seen various applications come online for them. That one is signal to noise. I don't know that I've seen super compelling value. I could be wrong on this one because it's not an area I'm familiar with, but I think that one, it's just going to be depends on how accurate the AI is. Other exciting AI applications, most fall within the risk mitigation bucket, like water leak detection. Very simple idea, flow sensing, but then you kind of need the analyses and to sort of understand when something is a problem as opposed to someone just turn on a tap at higher volume, right? So there's a level of sophistication and analysis there that I think is exciting and has come online as well. IoT, certainly all the sensor data that's kind of now streaming in for sure, and then people are building use cases off of that. So my advice to people on AI is, I know it's very hard to put AI on your pitch deck. There is even some research to suggest you get more funding if AI shows up on your pitch deck. That might be true. But when you start kind of selling it into contractors, just be very clear around what it'll do and be very clear around the accuracy of that AI. And it's not just AI for the sake of AI.
On that note, you know, we can't talk about AI without talking about the future of what the next transition of AI, and that's digital twin technology.
Yeah.
I'm personally very bullish on that kind of technology. I've been a huge advocate of that technology. Love to kind of get your perspective, and also Mark and the rest of the panel, Greg, San. What is your take on digital twin technology? We know there's only a handful of players out there. The barrier to entry is extremely high. What is your take on digital twin?
I'm going to pass this one on to any others that would choose to comment, because I think in general, my view is that AI makes more sense on the office side, which it does include design and digital twin technology rather than field at this point in time. But I actually started field side first. And so on the design side, I have less mature kind of thinking. So welcome the views of the panel.
Well, digital twin, as I see it, is very much connected to what we were talking about before, computer vision with AI, to be able to map the BIM model, which is we need to advance as an industry, to then map to, you know, what's in place, right? Create the digital model, point cloud, or stitch together photographs. And I think it is the next big thing. Right. It is. I totally agree with you. It is the next big thing, and that's going to be hugely impactful.
Daniel,
I kind of think of it very simply. Maybe I'm off base here, but it's kind of like you know, here's an image of what it's supposed to look like, and here's an image of what it actually looks like, and what's different. Right. As simple as that. There's a lot of opportunity for that. I mean, that's as straightforward and as tight as you can be. There's huge opportunity for that. With sequencing, with scheduling, with everything, you know, from start to finish.
I agree.
Quality control.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, quality.
So I want to be mindful of everyone's time. There's a lot of questions that came through, and I'll obviously share these questions with our panel. But I want to get to one last question before we wrap up, and that is on some of the biggest challenges and where the opportunities are. And it's a great question that came up early. And Andres asks, what are the biggest operational challenges that need to be addressed by technology companies in the construction world that have yet to be addressed?
Good one. I think maybe the simple answer is production. And this is actually where maybe digital twin technology can come into. So our CIO kind of gave this example where like when he goes to the construction CIO roundtables, like the first problem kind of top of the list every year, doesn't matter which year, is like how do we drive production in field effectively? Because the problem with a lot of the tools right now is kind of point solutions, right? And it's very difficult to kind of deploy a lot of point solutions for different things. But the whole idea of how do you drive in-field production for a contractor, what you're obligated on it to deliver a certain building at a certain time, at a certain budget. And you're coordinating massive amounts of people on the same place to sort of actually get that done. And so how does technology help in driving production in field, right? Whether or not that's tracking it, whether or not that's updating it to the plan, whether or not that's coordinating it, but how do you make that flow faster? Because the single largest bucket of value probably is in time, right? The schedule of the job, and then all the upstream cost on the owner side to actually, and the lot between the lost opportunity cost, the carry cost, and so on and so forth. I think the time component is quite important here, but it needs to be a time, but with the high quality product and with a good safety performance, and so on and so forth. So that's just my personal take. I don't know if anyone else has a different view.
I'll add one different view, and I'll keep it high level. I know we're running out of time. I think, right, like it's no secret that the industry has suffered from this kind of abysmally low productivity, right? And you compare it, that McKinsey report that came out a year or two ago, to other industries. It's like one of the only industries that productivity has gone down in the last 30 or 40 years. And so our view was that a big source of the inefficiency in the industry stems from construction's very poor flow of capital. Like there's some crazy statistics out there that contractors don't get paid till 75 or 90 days after they do the work, right? And so I think there's, the question was, where is there big opportunity? I think there's an enormous opportunity in the flow of capital in construction. I think you look at some of these remote site technologies that Greg and Jiki were mentioning earlier. Those companies are generating an unbelievable amount of data that's going on the job site. And so what I would love to see, and what we're very early in starting to see, I would love to see insurance companies, lenders, I would love them to use that data that's being generated from the job sites and use it to innovate on their products, whether it's construction lending products, insurance products, payments. But I think the flow of capital in this industry has been a huge inefficiency and is one of the reasons for such low productivity.
Sung, Mark, last word?
Yeah, I think, thinking even longer term, we're seeing a lot of companies working on different kinds of, manufacturing or like prefab or those kinds of methods. And, frankly, I don't know what the right answer is. I think, traditional methods are tried and tested and have worked. But also there are innovative ways to advance that. I don't know what the answer is, but I think there's a lot of really smart entrepreneurs working on it. So I'd love to see, some of those models succeed and gain more traction.
Awesome. So thank you all for joining today. That's all the time that we have for today's conversation. Daniel, Mark, Jitki, Sung, and Greg, thank you all for sharing your thought leadership. I hope everyone, including our amazing audience and community, had a great time. I certainly did. If you would like to use the power of CREtech to be featured in an upcoming co-produced webinar on a topic of your choice to showcase your company's expertise, or would like to present at our next virtual demo day, please email me at ash@CREtech.com or by going to CREtech.com. Again, my name is Ash Gonzandia, and it was a pleasure to be your host today. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to our amazing esteemed group of panelists today for sharing your thought leadership. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.